Hello, everybody. It is good to be here with you this morning. My name is Brad Sherk. I'm the youth pastor at WB, and Gareth has asked me to come and share a little bit about how God is at work in our youth culture. Our youth are absolutely incredible, and I really do have the privilege of leading them every week. Our junior youth meet right here in this room every Wednesday night, so I was just here last night. The vibe was a little different, you know. A little bit more energy, a little louder. Shrieking was a word would be a word I would describe the sound of this room, but it was wonderful. And we've been doing that every Wednesday since the fall. Our senior youth meet on Friday nights, and we gather together for worship time just like this. We get to learn about Jesus and what it means to follow him. And man, has it been so cool to see the way our youth have engaged coming out of COVID. They are so eager to be together and to just live life, to be in community. They want to know what it means to follow Jesus. And there's been a really neat opportunity that COVID has brought us that I'll share a little bit more about later. But there's an eagerness and a desire to make change in the world and to tackle the big, tough questions in life and to really think about what this life is all about. So that's been pretty cool to do already so far this year, and I'll get to share some stories and some more insight on this upcoming generation that is so amazing. But first, a little bit about me. So yes, I'm Brad, and I've been born and raised right here in Waterloo. I went to high school here. I went to the University of Guelph with Katie, and I studied art. I've been a youth pastor here at WB for the last 9 years as of January of 2022, and man, that's just been absolutely wild. I've been married to my beautiful wife Leah since 2014, and we have 2 boys, Bo and Forrest, and we have a baby girl on the way. Yeah, that's pretty exciting. The first Sherk girl in my immediate family. Like, I'm the oldest of 4 boys. My brother Kevin, he's got 1 boy. My uncle, he's got a boy. There's been a lot of boys. A lot of testosterone. A lot of smells. But my mom and my wife, they will now finally get their girl, which we are very, very excited for. Yep, there's a little picture as well. They're all dressed up. We actually just got that yesterday. Funny story about that, we didn't know we were pregnant until about 3 weeks ago. We're already 26 weeks. So we're due in March, and we didn't know we were pregnant until like 3 weeks ago. Because, Leo was going, I just thought I was eating too much McDonald's, and I hadn't felt any different. So no nausea, no symptoms, no nothing. So she didn't think anything of it until one day we were like, you know what, we should just take a test just in case. And here we are. But we're pretty excited, so we're doing March. I'm also an artist, a photographer. I love bird watching. I love to get outside with my camera. Actually, I remember a time driving with Katie to Guelph, and we saw a bald eagle along the Conestoga River, and we were thrilled. We were late for class, and the teacher didn't understand why, and I said, you know what, you don't get it, you're not a birder. But I'm a huge nerd, and I absolutely love taking photos of our local wildlife, and I love getting our youth out in nature and helping them understand this beautiful creation that God has all around us. So God has led me to this role as a youth pastor, and I would say my own life was changed because of my own experience in youth ministry as a teenager. I had a youth pastor, his name was Joe. I grew up at Creekside, and he made the Bible come alive for me. He made it interesting and exciting, and he lived a life that was different from the other adults I saw. He was loving, and he went the extra mile to make sure that people felt welcomed and loved and included. He loved to get involved with the poor, and it inspired me. It really did. He really did have a huge impact on my life. He died a couple years ago of cancer, but man, I'm so thankful for the influence that he had, along with other youth leaders, along with my parents. And so, man, it has been an absolute blessing and privilege and honor to be a youth pastor and to do that same thing for some of our other kids. Gareth has asked me to come and share some of my insight on our current youth generation, also known as Generation Z. Yes, I said Z. That term was coined in the States. I know I'm not American. We say Zed. It's funny how Americans don't know that the rest of the world says Zed. They just look at you like you got 2 heads. But anyways, I'm going to call it Generation Z because it was developed in the States, and so I'm going to call it by that name. So here's kind of our general overflow of where I want to go. So we're going to start off. I'm going to test you on your knowledge of the Gen Z lingo. of the slang words that our youth are using these days. I want to see how well you know your grandkids. Then we're going to talk about who is this generation? Who is Generation Z? Some of their defining characteristics. I've got some insight on our culture right now that our youth are buying into, as well as what does Gen Z look like in the church, and how can you as seniors minister to this coming generation? And we'll have some time at the end for some Q&A as well. So, are you ready? We're going to start with the Gen Z lingo quiz. Are you ready?
Prizes.
Oh, there is prizes. That's right. We got some prizes. Basically, we're going on the honor system here, and if you get, whoever gets the most right, we're going to give you a prize. If you get them all right, I will be very, very impressed. All right, here we go. Word number 1 is yeet. Is it A, a yummy root vegetable? Is it B, to throw something? Is it C, a cool way to say yes? Or is it D, it has no definition and can mean anything the user wants it to mean? Hands up for A. No, not a yeet. That's a B. Hands up for B. Hands up for C. Hands up for D. The correct answer is D, it has no definition and it can mean anything the user wants it to mean. So you know what, if I did want to say, hey, can you pick me that yeet right there, and it actually is a B, it could be. Or if you wanted to answer to your kid who's asked you, your question is yes or no, you can say yeet. And they won't know what to do with that. It will be amazing. I'd love to see you do that. All right, next word is sus. Is it A, a person's influence or energy? Does it mean suspicious or sketchy, or is it awesome or cool? Hands up for A. All right. Hands up for B. Hands up for C. Correct answer is suspicious or sketchy. It's a short form there for suspicious, for sure. All right. Fam. Is it A, your family? B, a short form for a fanny pack? Is it C, your friend circle or your community? Or D, a way to say that's weird? What do you think? Is it your family? Hands up. Lots of you. Okay. B, fanny pack. They wear fanny packs. I'm just going to let you know that right now. They really do. C, is it your friend circle or community? And D, is it a way to say that's weird? The correct answer is C, your friend circle or community. Your family, that's not fam, that's your fam jam. Okay? Friend circle is your fam. Your family is your fam jam. Alright? You gotta remember this, it's very important. Alright, flex. Does it mean a vehicle by Ford? Does it mean to show off? A way to say, that's awesome. Or is it D, being flexible and easy going? Hands up for A. No Ford people. Okay, B. Alright, C. Way to say that's awesome. Or D, being flexible and easy going. Alright. The correct answer is B, to show off. Has anyone gotten all of them right so far? Ooh. Adam, you're a little more connected with the youth these days, right? Yeah. Awesome. Okay, we got one more. One more. The word is extra. Is it A, flamboyant and outrageous? Is it B, unnecessarily showing off? Is it C, a newspaper? Or is it D, a way to say, more please? What do you think? A? All right. B? A newspaper? Or D, a way to say, more please? Extra pickles? The correct answer is unnecessarily showing off. So when you go to Slate Church, you can come out of the worship, you can go say, oh man, that was extra. Thank you. That's something. Chuckle at that. All right. So now that you know, there's our language quiz. Now that you know, you should be able to decipher this Generation Z translation of 1 Corinthians 13. No problem. It says, love is chill. Love is dank. It does not thirst. It does not flex. It is not extra. It does not cancel others. It is not sus. It is not salty. It keeps no receipts. Love does not spill tea, but rejoices with the woke. It always stands, is always fam, is always goat, always slays. You understand perfectly. Just so you know, there's no actual translation, Generation Z translation of the Bible. That's pretty much heresy, but it's fun. So, who did well on that quiz? Who got 4? Anyone? 4 of the 5? 3 of the 5? Okay, few of you. Excellent. We're going to get you some prizes later. If you got 3 of the 5, it's on the honor system. I think I can say that okay with you. If I would say it was on the honor system with some of our youth, doesn't always go very well. All right, so I want to give you a little bit of insight on this generation. Who is Generation Z? Well, Generation Z currently makes up the largest demographic in our Western culture. There are 6 living generations on our planet right now, and you can read a little bit about them right there if you would like. So Generation Z is generally, someone born between 1995 and 2010. So I'm a millennial. I was born in 1990. And Generation Z, there's a little bit of wiggle room on the actual years, as there is with any generation. I would actually say that some of our young people who were born around 1995, some of them are more like millennials, some of them are more like Generation Z, because they're in that kind of gray zone there. And they're all shaped by something. So if you just want to think about who maybe your grandkids are, your neighbors right now, our youngest Generation Zs, if they were born in 2010, they are currently our youngest junior youth, so grade 6s. Okay? And our oldest Gen Zs are already post-grad. They're already entering the workforce, they're into grad school, they're smart, they're incredibly smart. I'll talk about that in a little bit too. But some have called Generation Z the last generation that we will ever speak of, because the speed of our culture is changing so rapidly that marking the beginning and ending of new generations is becoming almost impossible. Generation Z is growing up entirely post 9/11. That's crazy to think about. They've experienced radical changes in technology and understanding of the family, of sexuality, of gender. They live in multi-generational, multi-racial households. Think about this. For Generation Z, since they have been on the planet, the internet has always existed. That was made in 1993, including Google as well. They've always grown up treating Wi-Fi as entitlement. They've never licked a postage stamp. The Lion King has always been on Broadway. Their mom and dad have always had at least a Nintendo 64 to help them through the sleepless nights with the baby. I've never been a gamer. Didn't do that with our kids, but we watched YouTube and stuff late at night. Hybrid cars have always been mass-produced. Cell phones have become so normalized in class that their teachers don't know if they are taking notes, studying, or if they're playing a party. They joined Harry Potter and his gang of wizards to build their reading skills through all 7 books available to them. And I remember when the first one came out when I was in probably grade 1. But they've always had that. So let me unpack the characteristics of Gen Z a bit more slowly. In his book, Meet Generation Z, pastor and author James Emery White lists 5 defining characteristics of this generation based on the studies that we're seeing from Pew and from Barna. And so a lot of the stats I'm going to give you today come from this book, and you're welcome to ask me for my notes later if you'd like to see them more. So the first one is that the recession marked. So there's been economic crashes in 2000 and in 2007 that have contributed to their personalities developing and their life skills developing in a socioeconomic environment that's been marked by uncertainty, chaos, and complexity. They're coming of age at a very distinct global event, the COVID-19 pandemic. That's going to shape them for their entire lives. Simply put, all of this together has made them deeply worried about the present state of the world. Secondly, they're Wi-Fi enabled. That means, that we could refer to my generation, millennials, as digital natives. That's why Gareth has had me do the tech stuff today and speak to you. Because we have comfort and we have an innate ability with digital technology. My wife, she's way better at this stuff than I am, and I think I'm okay at it. My wife just knows how to use technology. I'm blown away by it. So if millennials are the digital natives, then Generation Z is the internet in its pocket generation. The way technology has radically changed in their lifetime makes them different from my generation. The iPhone was released in 2007, along with all other kinds of smartphones, and 91% of our Gen Zs go to bed with their devices. They are attached to them. They've grown up with them. Currently, teens spend on average almost 9 hours a day absorbing media. That's a lot of time. And because of this, due to this increased digital communication replacing face-to-face relationships, they are considered to be one of the loneliest generations ever. 69% of them will report feeling lonely. 69% of them will report feeling shy. 68% feel that no one knows them well. And that's coming from superficial, shallow relationships, not necessarily a lack of them. But they know that their friendships don't go that deep. I think that the Christian culture is different. I would say our youth have an incredible ability to build deep connection to each other, but that's because of Jesus. Thirdly, they're multiracial and diverse. Thanks to immigration reforms in the West, North American families are becoming more diverse. My family is one of them. I love it. My mixed race marriages are becoming normal. Fun fact, since the 1700s, the most common last name is Smith. Up until today, guess what it is? Rodriguez. Right? In the last 30 years, at least in the States, there's been a 400% increase in black-white mixed marriages and a 1,000% increase in Asian-white marriages. And as a result, Generation Z has become incredibly racially diverse, the most of any generation yet. They are incredibly accepting and inclusive. More on that later. Fourthly, White suggests that they are sexually fluid. The accepting nature of Generation Z has led them to be very supportive of things like gay marriage and transgender rights. And that's coming from decades of individualism that permeates in our culture, particularly in sexual ethics. And this has made Gen Z a product of earlier generations' thought processes from this topic, but they have fully embraced it. Okay? They've taken it to be their own. They become sexually amorphous. Sex and sexuality to them is something that you construct and you own based on your feelings from moment to moment. There's a lot of danger in that. We'll talk about that too. A recent UK study, well, it's not that recent, it's 2015, but it revealed that nearly half of all young people, which would include Generation Z and millennials, my generation as well, they don't think that they're exclusively heterosexual. Almost half of them. Even though most studies show us that only about 4% of the adult population is really identifying as homosexual or bi, or would live in that lifestyle with those labels, yet with almost half of our young people, that's crazy, they would identify as not exclusively heterosexual. This reveals an increasing sense of sexual fluidity with this generation. They refuse any form of labels, because labels, as we'll learn later, are oppressive. Heterosexual and homosexual, both of these things don't define me, right? They would say, hey, you don't know me, you don't know who I am, don't define me, I'm going to define myself. For Generation Z, the idea of acceptance is basically interchangeable with the idea of affirmation. That's really important for us to think about. And because of this, all these dynamics of technology and sexual fluidity, they are one of the most addicted generations to pornography. And part of that is because of the quick access, ease of access that's right there in your pockets. And lastly, the fifth and probably the most defining characteristic of this generation is that they are post-Christian. This is different than non-Christian culture, okay? Like a Muslim culture or a culture with a different religion. Post-Christian culture actively pushes against Christian ideas, rejecting traditional values and morality that stem from our Western Christian history. John O'Sullivan is a former editor with the National Review, and he gives it this definition. A post-Christian society is not merely a society in which agnosticism or atheism is the prevailing fundamental belief. It is a society rooted in the history, culture, and practices of Christianity, but in which the religious beliefs of Christianity have either been rejected or worse, forgotten. And yet, about 78% of Generation Z believes in God. Right? And when I say God, that could mean anything from a higher power, or my favorite definition right now, my favorite title I hear all the time is the universe. Anyways, lowercase g, God, right? God can mean absolutely anything to them. But less than half of them attend weekly services in the US. I bet you that is significantly less in Canada. And when naming key components of their identity, less than a fifth of them would name religion. Most of them would say stuff like profession or education, their hobbies, as well as their gender or sexuality. And because of this post-Christian culture that we are living in Canada, we see a trend right now called the rise of the nuns. And that's not like Catholic nun, I mean N-O-N-E-S. It's a group that would claim no religion, or religiously unaffiliated when they were to check off a box on a survey, right? They would say none. And that's different from atheism. That's different because someone who checks off as a nun hasn't taken the time to really ask or think about what they believe. An atheist is different because an atheist has thought about what they believe. They've done the research, they've asked good questions, they've looked for answers, and they've come to a conclusion. We are seeing a trend where people aren't asking those questions. They are just not even taking the time to go there, which is actually a window for the gospel. More on that later. Barna Group has basically concluded that the pattern is indisputable. The younger the generation, the more post-Christian it is. Okay, so I want to shift now. I know that's like drinking from a fire hose. You're going to drink from another fire hose now. Okay? I want to move towards how we as a church and how you as seniors can reach and minister to this generation. But before we do that, I need to help you understand a little bit more about their worldview, some of our current cultural context that all of this stuff I've just talked about has come from. So here's my observation, okay, of where our secular culture is right now. Okay? As a post-Christian society, we are currently living in an era where our society as a whole is trying to function as if there is no God, while still holding on to the values that really only have any authority if there is a God. Okay? That's quite a sentence. So one more time. A post-Christian society, in our society right now, we are currently trying to live as if there is no God, while still holding on to the values that can really only have transcendent meaning if God exists. So for example, almost everyone in our culture and in our world, almost, especially amongst our youth, would agree that all humans have value, significance, and rights, no matter who they are, what they believe, where they come from, no matter their skin color or their ethnicity, their gender, their socioeconomic status, or any other sort of external identifier. Great stuff. You can 100% get behind that. But the problem is, with the way our kids are being brought up right now, secular humanism, Darwinism, just evolution on its own cannot give us this value. So what I mean by that is basically, if you're just an animal, here by accident, in an unkind, uncaring universe hurling through time and space, then there's no reason for you to have value. Survival of the fittest, right? I heard a pastor the other day. He was like, if Darwinism says survival of the fittest, the strong kill the weak, he was like, why don't we just let COVID do its thing? He literally said, let's just kill off all the old people. And of course you go like, what? No, of course not. Absolutely. But what moral reason do you have not to? Because they're all slowing us down. We've got to wear these masks and get jabbed, and we've got to stay 6 feet apart. Why don't we just stick to survival of the fittest? Because that's what animals do. Right? If you're just an animal, you have no purpose here. Your life has no meaning. You're just an animal. And that is literally what our youth are being taught. And it's not necessarily outright, but subliminally, because we're trying to function as if there is no God. Right? That's what they're being taught from childhood. And so it is no surprise to me that even in the most progressive, wealthy, educated university campuses, we're seeing disturbing trends of sexual assault and rape and violence. Because, hey, if you're just an animal with no purpose or meaning in life, then just go do whatever makes you happy. But of course, we as Christians, we know that all humans do have value, because God made us with value. We are fearfully and wonderfully made in His image, loved so much that God Himself died for us. God thought that you were so valuable that you were worth dying for. That's something I tell our kids all the time. So to recap, that idea is, our culture is currently trying to function without God, while holding on to the values that really only make sense if God exists. Okay? So how does that actually play out in the way our culture functions? Okay, so there's an idea called the secular salvation schema. I was listening to a podcast by Mark Sayers and John Mark Comer. They're Christian pastors, thinkers, they're authors, and they were talking about this cultural observation known as the secular salvation schema. And basically, it is this idea around how we cannot escape an inner drive for salvation. Even if we're not Christian. Even if we're not Christian, there's still a version of being saved from the brokenness and sin, from the wrong things that are happening in our world. And it actually follows the same pattern of creation, fall, redemption, restoration that we would see in the gospel narrative. So let me just take you through that a little bit, because it's really going to help you understand our youth generation's worldview. I know that's kind of small. There's a lot of text that's going to come on the screen. But first off, we've got creation, right? Christian narrative, God creates the universe. It's wonderful. We get to be with God. It is perfect. We get to be in relationship with Him face to face. In the secular version, you have this inner child. When you're born, you have an innocence. It's your raw inner self that is innocent to the ways of the world, which I think is hilarious, because it's like, have you all not had kids? Like, kids are more narcissistic than adults are. They're just smaller and can't do as much damage with it. But that's a very romanticized idea of what it is to be a little kid. I've got 2, and we're going to have 3. Oh boy, they're not innocent. The fall then becomes any sort of trauma or externally given identities that remove that inner innocence when you're a child. So a wounded childhood, corruption from religion or family, society, your expectations based on your gender, sexuality, social class, religion, basically anything that doesn't arise from looking within yourself becomes fall. Any form of commitment or authority or responsibility is seen as an obstruction to your inner child and your inner self. Basically anything difficult that prevents you from feeling happiness, because happiness is one of the biggest values in our current culture. And so then oppression is this word that's just so overused right now, but basically it's any form of an external norm or authority or morality that is imposed on someone else, which is impossible to avoid in our world. Sin is therefore not feeling happy about yourself. It's feeling shame, self-doubt, low self-esteem. In secularism, happiness is the ultimate goal in life, and even happiness has taken a redefinition. It's been redefined as pleasure, which is different, because that's something that happens in the moment, experiential, always needing to be re-fulfilled. Does this make me feel pleasure in the moment? And of course we know that often just means as soon as it's done, you want it again and again and again and again. It's just a cycle. So then redemption. That becomes rediscovering your inner self. I hear this all the time, whether it's on YouTube, in podcasts, through Instagram, it's what the kids are reading and studying, but basically it's to look deep inside yourself to discover who you really are. Then speak your truth. Oh boy, that's a topic I could spend a whole series on. Self-help, right? Help yourself. Find your inner self. There's an obsession with personality theories and Enneagram. Salvation is how you get back to that uncorrupted inner self and discover who you are. And basically to live out your salvation then, do anything you want to do, be anything you want to be, just don't harm other people. Just don't hurt others. Anything is possible. So sexuality, according to our culture right now in a post-Christian society, is literally a doctrine of salvation. They look to sexuality for healing of the soul, for meaning and purpose in life. And guys, this is incredibly heavy. This is incredibly heavy on our youth culture because it's harmful, it's exhausting, because they're asking questions. How do I know? How do I know this is the me that I'm meant to be? How do I find that? How do I know this is what's inside of me versus what's being put on me from an external place? And why? Why then do I still feel empty even though I'm looking inside myself, I'm discovering myself, I'm expressing myself? It becomes a question of identity, right? Tim Keller has an incredible view on this stuff, and he's seen that there is a tiredness in our culture of trying to find identity. It's led to escapist culture, right? Alcohol, drugs, but the big one right now is entertainment, especially amongst our youth. Netflix, right? Jeez, like, when I was a kid, I used to have to go to Blockbuster or Rogers Video, right, to rent a movie. We literally had to get off our butts, out of our house, go drive in our car 5 minutes down the road to, school through all the videos, and, Jumbo Video was great because you got free popcorn. And then you have to hop back in your car, you go and you drive home, and you've got it for however long. But now it's like, hey, just press a button, and you've got it, right? It's instant gratification. But Netflix binging, you don't even have to wait week to week to watch shows anymore. You can just binge the entire thing all at once, right? Escapist culture. There's anxiety of finding an inner self and making sure that's the right self. And so because of all of this, we're seeing an incredible decline in emotional health, right? Depression, anxiety. Those are the two things I would say I see our youth struggling with the most of anything else. When it was me, when it was in high school, my friends probably wrestled with self-harm, cutting, and then drinking. Those are the two biggest ones. Today, I would say it is depression and anxiety that our youth struggle with the most. And so then finally, in this secular salvation narrative, redemption or restoration or heaven, really, it becomes having discovered your true self, you now have happiness, pleasure, no restrictions, no external authority of any kind ruling over you, which just leads to achievement culture, right? It's metrics that shape yourself and your expression of yourself. And so this idea of heaven then becomes this futuristic utopia where everyone is equal and everyone's wealthy, everyone's just being their true selves, there's no judgment, there's no racism or oppression, everyone can be who they want to be. And morality is just self-evident and easy to live by. But here's the thing. The secular salvation schema is failing. We're seeing it failing because our youth are realizing identity formation is a burden. The values that our culture holds, they're realizing that they're paper thin if God doesn't exist. I seriously believe that. They're seen as empty. There's no greater authority or reason for them. Turns out, morality is not self-evident. As we look around the world and see the chaos and the destruction around the world, we know morality is not self-evident. And happiness, it's not as achievable as our culture makes it out to be, nor is it ever as good as our culture makes it out to be, because we've redefined it as pleasure. And this creates a window for the gospel. Okay, so there's the second fire hose I've had for you. So, while our culture at large would live by this secular salvation schema, members of Generation Z just eat this stuff up. They love this. They go, oh yes, I want that, but like I said before, they don't necessarily take the time to say, why do I believe that? They go, that sounds good, I want to believe in that, I want to live by it, but they've never asked why. And so, because this is what they're living by, the greatest values for Generation Z are personal, individual freedom, and happiness. No surprise to me that anxiety and depression are rampant, because our youth have put their entire hope and lives and identity in an illusion. At best, they live their life just trying to have fun, do whatever pleases them in the moment, avoid doing anything hard, never really thinking about the greater meaning of life or big life questions that come with it. And they remain separated from God. At worst, they constantly struggle to find purpose, meaning, value, identity in their lives. They never find an identity that gives them significance. They're constantly wrestling with peer pressure, with comparison. Instagram is toxic for comparison culture. No wonder our youth are struggling. In fact, during COVID, the stats around teenage girls in the psychiatric ward at hospitals has doubled. Doubled. Because what are they doing? They're spending all this time on their phones, seeing all these other beautiful people out there that look perfect. And they're going, well, I don't look like that. And so at worst, they struggle with peer pressure, comparison to others, self-doubt, loneliness, anxiety, depression, and they're also still separated from God. So one of my favorite passages to tell our youth all the time is John 10:10. Where Jesus says, the thief comes only to steal, kill, and destroy, but I have come that they may have life and have it to the full. And I love the way the Message paraphrase puts it. It says, the thief is only here to steal, kill, and destroy, but I have come so they can have real and eternal life, more and better life than they ever dreamed of. I tell our youth all the time, guys, you want to live a better life than you've ever dreamed of? Come follow Jesus. Come find purpose and identity that doesn't fail, significance and value that remains, that is deep, even when life circumstances let you down. And that's our window. That's our window to advance the gospel. So, what does Generation Z look like in the church? I know so far I've painted a pretty bleak picture. Sorry to be a buzzkill. But believe me, there is good news. We are going to be talking about what God is doing right now in our church, in our youth. But I need to be a downer one more time. Is that okay? And then I promise I'll give you some good news, okay? I'll give you some uplifting stats and ideas after that. All right, so to help us understand Generation Z members in our church and how the church can reach this generation, I have to talk about some of the church's ugliness a little bit, okay? Barna Research Group did a survey of the young and unchurched, probably millennials and Gen Z. I have to just double check that. They offered some words and phrases as possible descriptors of the church based on some of their previous research. And so the percentage of those who affirm these words and phrases are going to be in brackets on the screen, okay? Coming in at number 1, anti-homosexual, judgmental, hypocritical, old-fashioned, too involved in politics, out of touch with reality, insensitive to others, boring, not accepting of other faiths, and confusing. Now, while these descriptors may or may not be justified, I think in many cases they are, but the data shows that members of our youth generation currently see the church as being out of touch with reality, irrelevant to them, blinded by white privilege, power, corruption, moral failures, and outdated ideas about life, morality, and humanity. The author of that book I mentioned, James Emery White, He puts it this way. He says, many of those outside the Christian faith think Christians no longer represent what Jesus had in mind. That Christianity in our society is not what it was meant to be. We're seen as hyper-political, out of touch, pushy with our beliefs, and arrogant. The biggest perceptions of all are that we are homophobic, hypocritical, and judgmental. Simply put, in the minds of many people, modern-day Christianity no longer seems Christian. So the question I really have to ask then isn't how can we draw the next generation back into church, it's can we blame them for not wanting to show up? But as promised, okay, here's the good news. Members of Generation Z are mature and in control. They're diverse, they're tolerant, they're open-minded, they're actively anti-racist. They are actively involved in their communities. Many of them volunteer on a regular basis. They're intent on changing the world. They know it's broken. That's huge. If you're ever wanting to connect with someone about the gospel, I always start by talking about, hey man, look at around the world. It's broken. Why do you think that is? And then we get to talk about how God didn't want it to be that way and that Jesus can save us from it. This generation is eager to start working. They seek education and knowledge. They're globally social. They're hyper-aware and concerned about humanity's impact on the planet. They can communicate quickly with speed and images, texting, emojis. They value human equality, as I mentioned. And they actively push back against some of the oppression of the poor, the marginalized that we have seen in our culture. They have huge respect for the environment. They want to take responsibility for it. And get this, 70% of them believe that they should orient their lives towards making a difference in the world. How amazing is that? Actually, I look at some of these things, and I can actually see, diversity, acceptance, equality, stewardship, love. Those are incredibly Christian values that really make the most sense if we follow Jesus. And so, my suggestion then, if the church really wants to reach the next generation, we should look for the places where the values of Generation Z line up with the teachings of Jesus and pursue those things together. So where our culture's values do not line up with the biblical teachings, there we need to stand our ground and point to a better way. We need to be countercultural. And in order to be countercultural, we need to be like Jesus. Upside down kingdom indeed. So for example, where our culture is saying that truth is relative, you can be whoever you want to be, you do you, speak your truth, discover who you really are, we should point to the fact that Jesus is the truth. He's the one who brings us life to the fullest when we surrender to him and know him as the truth. Where our culture would say that individual freedom is what matters most, we can point to the fact that freedom is actually not doing whatever you want. It's not having no rules. It's knowing which rules are going to be good for you and which ones aren't. Because if we just have no rules, that just makes you a slave to your own desires. True freedom is found in the lifestyle of Jesus, in knowing him, in living like him. What is best for us is actually to submit our desires, take up your cross, deny yourself, and follow Jesus. Submit our desires to who is best for us. And where our culture would say that true acceptance means affirmation, we can point to how Jesus was constantly, this blows me away, constantly around the most notorious sinners of his day, and they actually liked being with him. Right? He didn't affirm them, he offered grace and truth. He would always meet them with where they were at, while pointing to what would be best for them. Simply put, I don't think we need to agree with someone in order to love them, and we need to say that. In his article, Generation Change, one of the senior writers for Relevant magazine, which is, it's okay, but I liked this quote. He said this about this generation: speculate for a moment what might happen if the religious members of Generation Z grow up and stay in the church. A projection of all this data points to churches that are more diverse, transparent, compassionate, and active in their surrounding community. Best case scenario, the Gen Z church looks like an active response, a pushback really, to the critiques the church faces right now. That's pretty amazing. And I will say, I continuously see youth who really do love Jesus. They are committed to living in the same way that Jesus lived. We just had an Operation Christmas Child packing party this past weekend with our youth. We packed 370 boxes and backpacks for kids around the world, and our youth loved it. They were eager to sign up. It was amazing. Actually, I almost had to turn some people away because we had too many people. That was incredible, absolutely incredible. They're warm, they're welcoming, they're accepting. I see our kids all the time on Fridays and Wednesdays, bringing their friends, introducing them to other people, making sure that they are connected and welcomed and loved and feel at home. Jill and Georgia Nyman, those girls blow my mind all the time. They are incredible. They go out of their way, if they see a new person, to introduce themselves, to invite them in, and it makes me want to cry. But they want to be involved in our communities. They want to serve one another. They want to talk about important issues like racism, like oppression, like sexuality and poverty. They want to be part of the solutions to the brokenness we see. So, that leads me to my last segment here. How can you as seniors minister to this next generation? How can you minister to your grandkids, to your neighbors, to if any of you are retired teachers or still on the substitute list of the students in this world? I've got 5 suggestions for you, okay? First one is to pray. Pray, pray, pray. Like their lives depend on it, because, in some ways they do. Pray for them if you can every day, and I know you already are. And I want to thank you for that. I know you pray for our ministry. I know you pray for me. Pray for our church. Thank you. Number 2 is build relationship. I always say to my leaders that the vessel for the gospel is relationship. Trust is key. So take time and intentionality to connect with someone on their level, to ask them, how are you really doing? What's going on in your life right now? Pro tips, McDonald's, it's a love language. So I'm going to take them out from McDonald's. Oh, they're so happy. Girls are really great for going to Starbucks and having a nice chit-chat. The guys, I find you need to do something together in order to make a connection. So I'll often take them out with me to look for owls, go on a walk, to do some photography, do something together. They need a task while they have that conversation. Remember, this is considered the loneliest generation yet. They do seek true community and connection, even though they're often really bad at it because they're used to, having relationships over a screen. In person, it can be awkward, but give it time. Pray. Intentionally ask them how they're doing. Which leads me to the next one, is to ask good questions. To actually get to know someone and hear their story. Most people, especially Generation Z, I find are about 3 or 4 good questions from their entire worldview falling apart. You could ask someone like, hey, why do you think that all humans have value? Oh, because they're people. Okay, what does that have to do with them having value? How do they get their value? Oh, well, because they do this or that. Well, what happens to someone who's bedridden and can't do any of those things? Why does that person have value? And then it just falls apart. It's hilarious. It's really fun, actually. So ask them, why do you believe what you believe? What's important to you? What does our world need to work on? If you're ever having a conversation with some of your grandkids at Christmas or the next family gathering, ask them, what makes you sad when you look around the world? What do you think the solution is? Hey, what do your friends think about stuff like drinking or partying, legalized marijuana? What about social media? How much time do you spend on your phone every day? Or what about religion? The big one is that I've already asked a bunch of times is, do you believe all humans have value? Why? What do you think about faith? What do you struggle with in believing something like Christianity? My favorite one that I hear all the time, not just from youth, but is, I'm not religious, I'm spiritual. I hear it all the time, mostly from white people. When I hear that one, I go, oh, what do you mean by that? And usually it's some sort of, not really well thought through answer around how they believe there's a God out there that they can pray to that helps them, like some sort of magic vending machine in the sky. And then, of course, you ask them, why do you believe that? And it all falls apart. But, as you ask good questions, this is key. Listen. Just listen. Without judgment, even if they are saying total heresy, which sometimes they will, just listen to seek to understand first. This past summer, I got to speak at Camp Crossroads, and I was there for Youth Week, and I met a young youth named B. In B's words, they were a gender-fluid queer person who uses all pronouns, who likes theater and video games. And I got to hear B's story. I got to hear about how they had grown up in the church. It was a small, pretty conservative church that never really understood B. And they felt like they were always being judged and didn't really have any family or anyone who would really listen to them. And sure, while we wouldn't necessarily affirm a bunch of the things that B believes, we could certainly listen, ask good questions, and seek to build relationship. I actually I learned that B, after having this conversation with me, actually started attending youth group again. was just blown away. Blown away. Because she said that you just listening to me and hearing my story was demonstrating Jesus' love for me. And that pushed them to go and, hey, I want to pursue this faith thing. And I remember me saying that I actually want to be a Christian, I just don't know if I can. Because of what my friends will think, because of the community I'm in, because of what I'm feeling. But I want to. So I pray. Fourth suggestion is the importance of apologetics, right? So members of Generation Z are skeptical about almost anything, especially traditional authority figures, pastors, teachers, politicians for sure. They have zero attention span because they're so used to communicating with symbols and speed. And so they need to know why they believe something, right? Keep coming back to that. There are good reasons for why we can believe the Christian worldview, why we can trust it. And so when I'm speaking to our youth on a Friday or Wednesday, there are always two things I try to have within my messages. One is why you can believe what I'm saying. Talk about history, science, sociology, all the kinds of reasons why we can trust Scripture. And then, secondly, why does this matter for your life? Why is this actually relevant to the way you're going to live right now? Which is why I always come back to that verse, John 10:10, life to the fullest. You want to find life to the fullest, come follow Jesus. Some of the strategies that I've taken, I'll regularly do an apologetics series with our youth. There's so many good resources out there. I can give you some. I've shifted how I talk about the Bible. And what I mean by that is I actually won't say the Bible says blank. What I'll say instead is that the Apostle Paul once wrote, or Jesus once said. Because when we look at what the Bible was before it became the Bible as we know it, right? It was eyewitness accounts of the life of Jesus. It was letters written to the early church by real people who really walked with Jesus, who knew him personally, or knew the guys who knew him personally. I've also tried to avoid Christianese. And what I mean by that is avoiding words that no one uses outside of the church. I'm not going to pick on anyone here. But and sometimes our worship leaders will say, just come and have a seat in this place. Who says in this place? Like, when do you hear that any other time except for in church? But words like redemption, salvation, atonement, right? You need to explain all of those things. And so I'll try to avoid those words or use different words to help people understand who haven't grown up in the church. Because remember, this generation is incredibly post-Christian. I've also shifted how I talk about God. And what I mean by that is because God can mean anything these days, a higher power, the universe, not the God of the Bible necessarily, I try to talk about Jesus more. Because we can point to Jesus as an actual historical figure. We can point to the historical Jesus. People are less skeptical about Jesus than they are about the church. And they even like the person of Jesus, even if they don't agree or like religion or the church. They like this person, Jesus, who loved the poor and the marginalized, who taught some really good things about religion and pushed back against oppression. They like that Jesus. And then I get to drop the bomb on them that, hey, Jesus claimed to be God. So I'm watching your brains now. Lastly, is to give opportunities. I really do think this one's key for the church, the Big C Church, is to give them chances to use their giftings. To be in charge, to try something new, to make a change, to make mistakes, to give their insight, and to feel needed. I think that we need to invite them in, and it comes back to their desire to belong and to be loved for who they are. They really do appreciate mentorship, even correction from older adults who build into them through relationship. You can't just do that right off the start. It has to be through a trusting relationship. But they want those people to give them insight, to develop their skills and giftings. So maybe there's some space there for you with your grandkids or with your neighbors, whoever it might be, that you know within this generation. And if you don't, hey, you know what? I've got a whole whack load of kids that you can come and hang out with. If you'd ever, honestly, I would love for someone from your generation to come and be a youth leader. That would be phenomenal. I wouldn't be the oldest person in our youth ministry anymore. Wow, amazing. But man, when we had Gareth speak a couple weeks ago, they soaked it up. I can usually rant for about 20 minutes, and then, they start to start to fall off there. But Gareth was he probably went for a good 40 minutes. And they were just locked on him. Because they loved hearing his stories, and his life experience, his wisdom. And I can't always give all of that, because I'm a pretty young guy still. And so my encouragement for you is that they want to hear those stories. They don't necessarily always know what to ask of you. Like, hey, Grandpa, what did you back in your day, right? Like, they don't necessarily know to ask those things. Sometimes just to offer them is wonderful, to share those stories. So, in conclusion, I'm asking you to partner with me, whether it's through prayer, through the way you build a relationship with your grandkids, or through your neighbors, whatever it might be, is partner with me so that these amazing youth, and they truly are amazing, would know Jesus, so that Christ would be known in this next generation, because I truly do believe that this next generation will make a difference in our world. I think they're going to make a difference in our church, and we're already starting to see that. Oh my goodness, my wife leads worship at our church once in a while. She realized the other day that she had a whole bunch of Gen Z leaders on her team. And she actually had to she couldn't lead that day, we were on vacation, and she gave it over to Maddie Peng. And she watched the live stream on Sunday morning, and my wife doesn't cry very often. I cry more than my wife, seriously, all the time. And she watched this service, and she was bawling, because she was so proud of this generation who loves Jesus. I truly believe that Jesus is the answer to the struggles and to the reality of our current cultural climate that our youth are facing. And I believe this new generation needs the church to be the church. They need love and affection, relationship, mentorship, education, and community, and they have so much good about them that should be developed and strategically used for God. So, thank you. That is my presentation, my long-winded presentation. Can I just pray, actually, before we get into Q&A? Lord, thank you so much for who you are, for the significance, the value, the purpose you've given to every single one of us, for the way you died on a cross. You said we are worth dying for. Lord, that is not something to be taken lightly, and man, I'm so in love with you, Lord. Thank you. I pray that our youth would be able to come and know this love that you have for us, that you would use this wonderful generation of seniors to speak into the lives of their grandkids and their neighbors and students and those who are around them. That they would share their wisdom and experience, that they would ask good questions and build relationship and mentor those who are young and who need that experience and life knowledge. Lord, we need you in this because we will evidently screw it up. I do all the time. But I'm so thankful that the Holy Spirit is there with us, who will guide us and lead us in each of these things.